Kia ora everyone. This session is looking at incident analysis, and the key themes are looking at incident analysis process, reporting, recording and reviews within an organisation, and that's linking back to your SMP, the incident section on your SMP, so you can make some links there. Looking at some external investigations for outside agencies or national agencies like NSOIA and Mountain Safety Council, and quite a bit of the session was spent looking at the New Zealand Mountain Safety Council research that they did a couple of years ago and their data analysis of that. There's also some extra articles to look at in your own time if you're interested, is case-based teaching by Chris North and Andrew Brooks, and heuristic traps by Ian McCann. So an incident is defined as an umbrella term to encompass anything from a fatality, injury, illness, damage to equipment or environment, or an near miss. So it's a very wide term. A near miss is something that doesn't lead to an actual injury or damage or illness, but could have. So it nearly happened but didn't, and there's lots of learning to happen in this area here, but quite often they aren't recorded. And obviously an accident, and that can be a minor from fatality. Incidents are undesired events that could or do result in a loss. So kind of some two key themes there around what an incident is in terms of definition and what it encompasses. So just looking at the incident process, so for a notifiable event, and that is the term used by the Health and Safety at Work Act, and the WorkSafe used to identify a term of serious harm, notifiable event. Now that can, so internally within your own organisation, what would happen is it will get reported. The incident will get reported to your health and safety manager or coordinator or someone senior in the organisation, big or small organisation would get reported to. There's a bit of process to identify who that gets reported to. Then that may bring about an internal investigation of what happened in the incident, and you potentially could bring in outside experts for that, and that could then result in changes to your safety operating procedures and some of your documentation. External agency might come and investigate from so WorkSafe will be notified, and then they will decide, WorkSafe will decide whether there's an investigation needed or not. And if there is an investigation, then the outcomes of that WorkSafe could decide could be just education, and that could be within the organisation around learning from it, and for the wider sector, warnings or fines, or prosecution. So educate, engage, enforce is kind of the 3 E's in terms of the outcomes for WorkSafe. Or there could be an investigation and there's no further outcomes. The process gets a little bit more complex when there's a fatality. So someone dies in an incident at work. Now, obviously, you have a similar process here within your own organisation as previously. WorkSafe will be notified, obviously, but also the police and other agencies like Maritime New Zealand may be involved if it's if the fatality happened on water. But definitely the police and WorkSafe will be involved, and then they will probably both do some investigations or both decide who is going to do the investigation, and then whether there's any prosecutions from that investigation. Now, if they are prosecuted, then it will go to the district court, and they'll either be prosecuted under the Health and Safety at Work Act through WorkSafe or through the Crimes Act and the police. And generally what happens in workplace fatalities is it usually falls under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So that's where they get prosecuted, and the fines and prosecutions for under the new Act are a lot stiffer than the old ones. If there's no prosecution, it will go to the coroner, and a coroner is an experienced lawyer. You should come through the experienced lawyer process and end up investigating workplace fatalities, and they will gather a whole lot of information from different witnesses, police statements, a whole bunch of even technical experts, and then identify learning for the sector from that fatality. So this section here is just looking at incident reporting, recording, and investigation. So the 3 steps within an organisation that you need to have clearly identified, the process or steps for how that happens, how these things happen within your own organisation, and exactly what we're requiring in your incident section of your SMP. There's a good link here to an article within Moodle, Incident Reviews, Aspects of Good Practice by Kathy Halleck. It's a couple of years old, but the processes are still really important and key learning to come out of it, really good. So you can see here she talks about the Department of Labour, and they talk about serious harm events. So this is just Department of Labour. This is under the old legislation, Health and Safety and Employment Act. The Department of Labour was the key government department that looked after, that managed the Act, and now that's been replaced by WorkSafe, and serious harm events are now replaced by notifiable events. But have a read of this article. There's some really good learning to have out of it, and I've pulled some key points out of it in the next few slides. Analysing what has gone wrong in an incident is as important as what may go, anticipating what may go wrong in that outdoor activity. So essentially what Haddock is saying there is that risk management, so doing things before, systematically identifying hazards and risks before doing an activity and strategies to manage them, are as important as analysing events, incidents, and learning from those events. And then that learning, the key part about the learning is that it is transferred to inform standard operating procedures and policies, staff training, and organisational knowledge or institutional knowledge, which is really important when you have, if you're in an organisation where there's high staff turnover, a lot of that information knowledge can be lost as staff leave, experienced or long-term staff leave. So being able to retain that information through analysing and learning from incidents is really important. I think we quite often, it's easy to get complacent that it's the inexperienced and younger staff that have incidents, but it's good to keep in mind that anyone can have an incident. It doesn't matter how experienced or how long you've been around or how qualified you are, and that is backed up by incident statistics as well. We talk about incidents being classified. So when do you actually report an incident? From very minor, like a blister, through to something more severe. And so we look at the severity rating scale in your support documents. It's on the next slide. So the incident severity scale is on the vertical axis here has a severity rating, so it goes from 1 through to 10, and then you have the different types of things that can go wrong. So injury, illness, psychological damage, equipment, environmental damage along the top, and then the different categories within there. So you can starting with minor injuries, so splinters, insect bites, etc., is categorized as severity rating 1 through to multiple fatalities down the bottom and everything in between. So how this is useful, the document is useful, is most organizations would say anything from 3 and above is reported to organization internally, and then anything from 6 and above is reported to WorkSafe. Now this is a little bit document and it's a little bit old in that it talks about the Department of Labour here, which again has been replaced by WorkSafe, government department that manages the Health and Safety at Work Act. But probably just use this document here to identify what you want your staff to report to, what level. So 3 and above is what you would state for that. And then WorkSafe will have some different parameters around what is a notifiable event or not to them. So this slide is looking at reported and recorded, and so how do you record it? What is the process for recording within your organisation? And so there is an incident form in your support documents there, the template that is really a really thorough one that you can use. And then reporting, and then so just talking about before, so anything 3 and above on the severity scale is reported internally, and then 6 and above to WorkSafe. But just bear in mind that this may not be exactly what is required at the moment, but still gives you something to baseline to work from. So within your organisation, you will need to report all incidents 3 and above. Now, individual incidents may decide to be investigated more thoroughly, and that's probably the more serious events, not necessarily the ones, the high level ones that need to be reported to WorkSafe, but it's up to each organisation to decide in the senior leadership role whether there is a further investigation required other than just the incident report. But also it's important to collectively look at incidents over a period of time and see if there's any trends coming through. So that might be the end of the season, or annually you review the past season or the past year's incidents collectively, and what are the themes coming through? Are there any trends that you need to then link back to some safety objectives for the following season or year? You may decide to bring in an external agency, and that may be prompted by severity of incident or the number of incidents reoccurring in the same activity or in the same region of environment. So for example, I have done some incidents investigations for organisations that have had a fairly serious harm incident or close call, and they brought in asked Nazoya for help in terms of trying to figure out how it could be prevented in the future. So that was off their own organisation's back to do that, or they weren't required to do that. They just thought it was good practice to get some external feedback from that, which is a great idea, especially when you're working by yourself in an organisation and it's like a school. So when investigating incidents, there's a couple of different ways of structuring those reports or those investigation processes, and there's always more than one cause. There's always multiple different reasons why something happens, so it's about breaking those down and trying to pull out some key learning from that. So we break that down into the immediate and root causes. So the immediate cause is the unsafe act or equipment failure that kind of led to the event. So one of the front of mind things that happened straight away. The root causes are the underlying factors that lead to the incident. And these underlying factors are usually systemic, so they're part of a system that's led to a failure. And that might be within policies and staff training or staff culture. As mentioned earlier, notifiable events are reported to WorkSafe, and they are divided into 2 categories. So notifiable incident, which they define as unplanned or uncontrolled incident that exposes a worker or any other person to a serious risk, like a fall from heights. So that's when something's actually happened. A notifiable event is death, injury, or a notifiable incident. So that's the more generic term. Notifiable event and notifiable incident is a bit more specific about something that has happened. Now remember that a notifiable event could include a near miss, a significant near miss. This link here put out by WorkSafe, what events need to be notified in the education sector, gives some really clear examples about what needs to be notified to WorkSafe and what doesn't. So it's worth having a quick look at that. This slide and the next slide are just some examples of external agencies that have you can request an organisation to bring in outside help to and how that those technical reports can be used to help learning for the organisation and for the wider sector. So here is a report that I did for Nazoya for a rock climbing incident at a school, and all I'm really showing on this slide is a little bit about the process. So here is the content, so you can look at the different sections that were identified as part of the template for the incident review. The contributing factors, here's some examples of the contributing factors or causes, and then the final recommendations for the learning from that incident. So this is an example here of a report done as a technical expert for the Mountain Safety Council. So they have a very strong educational role in supporting the sector and land-based activities, and they help provide technical expert reports to the coroner when the coroner is reporting on fatalities in the outdoors, especially towards tramping, rock climbing or mountaineering. And again, here is the contents list here to give you some idea of the sections that are covered within the incident, and again the evidence that needs to be so we have access to all this evidence here, and that needs to be summarised and key points pulled out. And then again, some strong recommendations here about what has been learned from the incident, and then what the sector can learn from that. So the Mountain Safety Council did some very thorough research. 2017 they pulled together, 2016 pulled together a big report called There and Back, which was exploring, trying to gather huge amounts of data in 5 different areas, and came up with some really key learning in a whole variety of different facets of these activities, outdoor recreation activities. So spent a bit of time in class looking at that, the learning from that. And then from that, a couple of years later, they pulled out more specific and targeted learning for hunters. So there's a whole separate document here, a bit more in-depth research into incidents and fatalities with hunting, and then the same with tramping down here. So some really good documents to spend some time looking about, and all publicly available on the Mountain Safety Council website. In class, we broke into small groups with some of the material from There and Back, the research, Mountain Safety Council research, got in small groups to look through different, one of the 5 different outdoor recreation activities they looked at, and try and pull out some key points that people found within that group found interesting, and then why did you find it interesting. Now that data that they gathered for the research There and Back came from a whole variety of sources. So it came from participation survey through Sport NZ, primarily 11 years of injury data from outdoor recreation activities, or the 5 that they studied from ACC, 5 years of search and rescue data, and then fatalities, so looking at coroner's reports, so the coroner's office over the last 7.5 years around fatalities with those five different sections. In July 2021, Mountain Safety Council, on their theme of publishing research around learning from incidents, published this Avalanche Incidents in New Zealand, and then looked at 20 years of avalanche incident data. So that's publicly available on the website, and we had a bit of time looking at that as well. From the There and Back research that the Mountain Safety Council did, as well as drawing out those 2 key themes of hunting and tramping, they also specifically were able to drill down about where are some areas or tracks that record a number of incidents or fatalities, and they then published really in-depth guides for the general public and tourists about those tracks and things to watch out for and be prepared for. And so there's on YouTube, there's all these links here that if you're going to do the Cascade Saddle route, for example, down to Mount Aspiring, there's an 8-minute video here helping you identify key aspects of that track that are significant hazards and to watch out for. So there's really key, good information here, and well worth time looking at some of this.